Commander Li Huyon sat at his desk, staring at the blue light dancing in front of him. The holographic message floated in the air, its official seal spinning slowly. He read it again, just to make sure he wasn't dreaming. Oh, Galactic Command Game. Night Quarterly Event 847, Host Assignment. Human Space Station Unity Commander Li Huyon, Terran Diplomatic Corps. His heart raced. After 30 years of this tradition, humans were finally getting their turn to host. A different species would take charge of the galaxy's most important social event. The Valkyrie had hosted last year with their perfectly organized logic puzzles, the Zephyrians before that with their silent meditation games. Even the rock-like Granite Collective had managed to create something called Stone Wisdom Challenges. Now, it was humanity's turn. Huyon's fingers moved quickly across his communication panel. Within seconds, he had sent the invitation to his core team. He could already imagine their reactions. This was the chance they had all been waiting for. The first to arrive was Dr. Park Soo. She burst through the door like a whirlwind, her long black hair tied back in a messy bun, tablet already in her hand. As the station's xenopsychology expert, she knew more about alien behavior than anyone else on the station. "Hyun, this is incredible," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "Do you know what this means? We can finally show them what human creativity looks like." She immediately started pacing, her mind already working through the possibilities. The Carathians respect, strength, and honor. They'll want games that test courage and skill. The Nexari think as one mind, so they prefer activities where groups work together. The Thalassans love puzzles that flow like water, and the Luminari enjoy anything that involves patterns of light and energy. Before Hyun could respond, Lieutenant Kim Jin arrived. The young man's recreational activities coordinator badge caught the light as he moved. Jin had been planning for this moment since he first heard about the Galactic Game Night 6 months ago. "Commander," Jin said, barely containing his enthusiasm, "I've been preparing for this. I have ideas. So many ideas." His eyes gleamed with the kind of excitement that usually worried Hyun. Jin was brilliant at organizing entertainment, but he sometimes got carried away. The last time Jin had organized a party, 3 different species had requested formal diplomatic apologies for excessive fun. "Tell me," Hyun said carefully. "Well, I was thinking we could start with some classic human games, maybe some charades, definitely some trivia contests." But then Jin paused, his smile growing wider. "I've been working on something special. Strategy game that combines everything humans love about gaming. Resource management, diplomacy, role-playing, strategic thinking, and maybe a little bit of luck." The door opened again, and Chief Engineer Choi Min entered. Her practical uniform was already marked with grease stains, and her tablet showed complex, atmospheric calculations. Min was the person who made impossible things possible, and she looked ready for a challenge. 12 different species, she said without any greeting, each with completely different environmental needs. The Thalassans need their water chambers at exactly 18.7 degrees Celsius. The Luminari require energy field generators that can maintain their cohesion. The Carathians want higher gravity. The Nexari need space for at least 40 individuals since they never travel in small groups. She looked up from her tablet. "It's going to be complicated, but I can make it work. We'll need to modify 17 different sections of the station. Good thing we have 2 weeks." Hyun felt a familiar mixture of pride and worry. His team was brilliant, dedicated, and completely insane. It was exactly what made humans special in the galaxy, but it was also what made other species nervous about them. "Listen," he said, raising his hand for quiet. "This is our chance to show the galaxy what humans can do. We're going to make this the best game night in galactic history." Jin practically bounced in his chair. "I have so many ideas. We could do team competitions, individual challenges, maybe even some creative activities." "Activities, you?" Hyun turned to the doctor. "Can you handle the cultural aspects? Make sure we don't accidentally offend anyone?" Park Soo nodded, but her expression was thoughtful. "I can try, but I should warn you about something. Humans have a reputation in the galaxy." "Kind of reputation?" Hyun asked, though he suspected he already knew. were known for being enthusiastic about competition. Other species play games to relax, to socialize, to pass time. Humans play games to win. We turn everything into a contest, even when it's supposed to be just for fun? Jin looked confused. What's wrong with wanting to win? Nothing necessarily, Sue replied. But other species find our competitive spirit a bit overwhelming sometimes. We have a tendency to turn simple activities into complex challenges. Hyun considered this. It was true that humans approached games differently than other species. Where aliens might see a pleasant social activity, humans saw an opportunity to test themselves, to prove their skills, to emerge victorious. It was part of what made them human. It's what makes us interesting, he said finally. Min, how long do we have? 2 weeks to prepare everything? We'll need to start the atmospheric modifications immediately. As his team prepared to leave, Hyun felt a surge of excitement mixed with slight worry. They were about to introduce the galaxy to human-style entertainment. He had a feeling this game night would be remembered for a very long time. What he didn't know was just how right he was. The space station's docking bay had never been busier. Commander Lee Haeon stood at the observation window, watching as alien ships of every shape and size approached their home. His heart pounded with excitement and nervousness. The first to arrive was the Zephyrian vessel called Stellar Harmony. It moved through space like a swan on water, all smooth curves and graceful lines. Its silver hull caught the starlight and seemed to glow from within. Haeon had always admired Zephyrian ships. They were built for beauty as much as function. Right behind it came something completely different. The Crystalline Collective's ship looked like someone had taken a mountain and taught it to fly. It was all angles and geometric shapes, made of what looked like living crystal. Light passed through it in strange patterns, creating rainbow reflections on the docking bay walls. Commander, Chief Engineer Choi Min's voice crackled through his communication device. Atmospheric adjustments are complete in sections A through M. The air pressure, temperature, and gas mixtures are all set for our guests. Excellent work, Min. Any problems? Well, the Carathians are asking for higher gravity in their quarters. They're used to heavier worlds, and they say normal gravity makes them feel weak. Hugh nodded. The Carathians were a warrior species built strong and proud. Of course they would want to feel their full strength. Grant their request. What about the others? The Nexari hive ship is bigger than we expected. They're bringing 47 individuals instead of the usual 5 or 6. Before Hoyan could respond, Dr. Park Soo appeared at his elbow. Her tablet was covered in notes, and she looked both excited and slightly overwhelmed. That's normal for the Nexari, she said, having heard the conversation. They don't think like individuals. They think as a group mind. When they make decisions, they need enough individuals present to represent all aspects of their collective. Consciousness. Can we accommodate them? Hyun asked. Min's already working on it, Park replied. She's expanding Section J to give them more space. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Each alien species had different needs, and the human crew worked frantically to make everyone comfortable. The Thalassans needed their entire section flooded with water. They were aquatic beings who breathed liquid and couldn't survive in air. For more than a few minutes, Min had to completely redesign the water filtration and pressure systems. The Luminari presented a different challenge. They were beings made of pure energy, held together by special containment fields. Without the right equipment, they would simply dissolve into light and heat. The engineering team worked for hours setting up energy generators and field projectors. Through it all, Lieutenant Kim-jin bounced around the station like an excited child. Every few minutes, he would run up to Hyun with updates about the games. He was preparing. Commander, you have to see what we've done with the main recreation hall, he said, grabbing Hyun's arm. It's incredible. Hyun followed Jin through the station's corridors, past busy crew members making final adjustments for their guests. When they reached the recreation hall, he stopped in amazement. The large room had been completely transformed. Jin and his team had set up dozens of tables, each prepared for different types of games. There were card tables with comfortable chairs, board game stations with complex setups, and puzzle areas with holographic displays, but the centerpiece was something truly spectacular. In the middle of the room, a massive holographic display showed a three-dimensional galaxy, complete with stars, planets, and space routes. Tiny ships moved between worlds, and different colored territories marked various civilizations. "I call it galactic supremacy," Jin announced proudly. "It combines strategy, diplomacy, resource management, and role-playing. Each player can choose to play as their own species or try something completely different. You can build trade empires, form military alliances, or even create peaceful research civilizations." As Jin explained his creation, alien delegates began arriving in the hall. Their reactions were, interesting. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrians approached one of the card tables. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Zephyrians were known for their calm, logical approach to everything. "These cards have faces on them," he observed, picking up a playing card. "Are they meant to represent something specific?" "Oh, that's for poker," Jin explained with enthusiasm. "It's a game of skill, psychology, and calculated risk. You try to read your opponent's faces and body language to figure out if they're telling the truth about their cards or if they're bluffing." Veltar's expression remained neutral, but Heian noticed his eye twitch slightly. "So the goal is to deceive other players." Before Jin could answer, a voice like wind chimes spoke up. "Deception is the objective of this entertainment." The voice belonged to Resonance of Truth, the representative of the Crystalline Collective. She was a being of living crystal, about human height but completely transparent. Light passed through her body, creating beautiful patterns. But Heian could see that she was vibrating with what looked like confusion or distress. Dr. Park Soo stepped forward quickly. "Well, not exactly deception," she said diplomatically. "It's more like strategic misdirection. All the players know that bluffing is part of the game. It's expected and accepted." Heian watched as the alien delegates looked at each other. Could see them having silent conversations, exchanging glances that said more than words. The Nexari group clustered together, probably sharing thoughts through their mental connection. The Korathians stood straight and proud, but their eyes were wary. "Nothing to worry about," Heian said with his most reassuring smile. "We've prepared activities for every taste and skill level. There's something here for everyone." Out. But as the aliens continued to explore the room, examining the games with expressions that ranged from curiosity to bewilderment, Heian couldn't shake a growing feeling of unease. The guests seemed more puzzled than excited. They were looking at the games like scientists studying an alien artifact. Maybe Park was right about humans having a reputation for being too competitive. Maybe their idea of fun was different from everyone else's. But it was too late to change anything now. The games were about to begin, and Heian could only hope that once the aliens started playing, they would understand why humans found these activities so enjoyable. What he didn't realize was that they were about to understand far more than he had bargained for. The first hour of game night went exactly as Commander Li Hun had hoped. The alien delegates spread out across the recreation hall, trying different activities with polite curiosity. The Korathians gathered around the strategy board games, their warrior instincts making them natural players. They approached each move with the same seriousness they would use in actual battle. The Nexari were fascinating to watch. All 47 of them would look at a game board together, then suddenly move as one. They never seemed to discuss their decisions, but somehow they always agreed on the best move. Other species found this both impressive and slightly unsettling. The Thalassans floated in their water-filled section, playing games on waterproof tablets. Their large eyes never blinked as they studied puzzles that flowed and changed like ocean currents. The Luminari created beautiful light patterns as they played, their energy forms pulsing with different colors to communicate with each other. Everything was going perfectly. Then Lieutenant Kim Jin decided it was time to introduce poker. "Around everyone," Jin called out, his voice full of excitement. "Time to try one of humanity's favorite card games." He set up a table with 6 chairs and dealt cards to a mixed group of aliens. Admiral Reefwalker of the Thalassans lowered his water-filled helmet so he could sit at the table. Resonance of Truth of the Crystalline Collective took a seat, her crystal body refracting light in nervous patterns. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrians sat with perfect posture, studying his cards with calm interest. The key to poker, Jin explained, is reading your opponents. You need to watch for tells, small behaviors that show whether someone is confident or bluffing. Admiral Reefwalker's large, unblinking eyes stared at his cards. So the objective is to convince others you have superior cards, regardless of the truth. Exactly, Jin beamed, clearly proud that someone understood so quickly. Resonance of Truth's crystalline form suddenly became dimmer, like a light being turned down. This concept is disturbing. Why would one intentionally communicate falsehoods? Dr. Park Soo, who had been watching from nearby, quickly stepped forward. It's not lying, she explained carefully. It's strategic gameplay. The deception is understood by all participants as part of the rules. Everyone knows that bluffing is allowed. But the aliens still looked confused. The concept of deliberate misdirection as entertainment was clearly foreign to them. They played a few hands, but their discomfort was obvious. Then the humans started to really get into the game. Lieutenant Kim Min, who had joined the table, began talking constantly. You know, Admiral, you're holding your cards very tightly. That usually means someone is nervous about their hand. Or maybe you're trying to make us think you're nervous when you actually have great cards. It's hard to tell with you aquatic types. Engineer Choi Min sat across from him, methodically rearranging her chips into different patterns. She would stack them, then spread them out, then stack them again. The Luminari representative, a being of pure energy called Bright Pulse, seemed hypnotized by the movements. This is psychological warfare, war leader Talver of the Corinthians observed. He had been watching the game with growing interest. I approve of this strategy. The poker game quickly spiraled out of control. The humans brought more and more psychological tactics to bear. Started making comments about each other's breathing patterns, analyzing facial expressions, and even discussing whether certain species were capable of sweating under pressure. Your energy patterns are fluctuating, Choi told Bright Pulse. Are you nervous, or is that just how you normally look when you're thinking? I do not know, Bright Pulse replied, their form flickering with confusion. No one has ever asked me to deceive others for entertainment before. The breaking point came when Jin suggested they try charades. It's simple, he explained. Person acts out a word or phrase without speaking, and everyone else tries to guess what it is. What started as a simple word-guessing game quickly became something much more dramatic. The humans couldn't resist adding theatrical flair to their performances. Dr. Park went first. She was supposed to act out the word supernova. Instead of simple gestures, she threw herself onto the floor and began writhing dramatically while making loud swooshing sounds with her mouth. Supernova, she shouted when the timer ran out. How did you not get supernova? Ambassador Veltar, who had been watching with his usual calm expression, replied dryly. You appeared to be having a seizure. That was clearly a star collapsing and exploding, Jin argued passionately. The writhing was gravitational collapse, and the swooshing was the energy release. Park nodded enthusiastically. Among humans, interpretive performance is considered an acceptable form of communication. The aliens stared at them in amazement. Jin then demonstrated black hole by spinning rapidly while making sucking sounds. Choi acted out asteroid belt by hopping around the room while throwing small objects. Each performance became more elaborate. Then the humans began debating the artistic merits of each charade's performance. They created scoring systems on the spot, rating performances based on creativity, accuracy, and dramatic impact. They argued about whether sound effects should be allowed, whether props were cheating, and whether interpretive dance was a valid form of charades. They're keeping score of everything, Admiral Reefwalker whispered to Resonance of Truth. Indeed, the crystal being replied, her form dimming with what looked like worry. They appear to be transforming recreational activities into competitive enterprises. Commander Hyan noticed the aliens huddling together in small groups, speaking. In low tones, their body language suggested they were discussing something serious. Everything all right? He asked, approaching the largest group. We haven't even gotten to the main event yet. War leader Talver looked up with interest. The main event? Jin's eyes gleamed with excitement. Galactic supremacy. The ultimate strategy game. The aliens exchanged glances that Hyun couldn't interpret. He had a growing feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. The games were going well. Everyone was participating, and the humans were showing their guests the best entertainment their species had to offer. What he didn't realize was that the aliens were beginning to understand exactly what made humans so different from the rest of the galaxy. And they weren't sure they were ready for what was coming next. The massive holographic display in the center of the recreation hall suddenly burst to life. Stars swirled in three-dimensional space. Trade routes glowed like highways of light, and tiny military fleets moved between planets. Lieutenant Kim Jin stood in front of it all like a commander, preparing for the greatest battle in galactic history. "Welcome to Galactic Supremacy," he announced, his voice echoing through the hall. Each player controls a civilization with unique abilities, resources, and technologies. The goal is to achieve dominance through conquest, diplomacy, or economic superiority. He began handing out thick packets of paper to each alien delegate. The packets were so heavy that some of the smaller species needed both hands to hold them. "Don't worry about memorizing everything," Jin said cheerfully. "We'll learn as we play." The aliens opened their packets, and their expressions changed from curiosity to alarm. What they found inside was not a simple game. It's a simple game involved 47 pages of rules, detailed character backstories, and technology trees that looked more complex than actual military planning documents. This appears to be a comprehensive simulation of interstellar civilization management, resonance of truth, observed, her crystal form flickering with what looked like concern. "Exactly," Jin beamed with pride. "But with dice?" He held up a collection of dice with different numbers of sides. Some had 6 sides, others had 20. A few had shapes that seemed to defy geometry. What happened next was 6 hours of the most intense gaming experience in galactic history. The humans threw themselves into their roles with an enthusiasm that bordered on madness. Dr. Park Soo had chosen to play as a hive mind species. Within minutes, she began speaking in plural pronouns and referring to herself as we. She had written a complete backstory for her civilization, a fallen empire seeking redemption through peaceful expansion across the galaxy. "We have suffered greatly in the past," she said in a serious voice, completely lost in her role. "Our people were once proud, but now we seek only to rebuild through cooperation and trade." Lieutenant Kim Min had chosen a warrior culture, stood on his chair to deliver a stirring speech about honor and battle before declaring war on the Luminari faction. "By the sacred flames of our ancestors," he proclaimed, waving a foam sword that Jin had provided as a prop, "we challenge your energy-based civilization to honorable combat." Luminari representative, a being of pure energy, called Bright Pulse, actually began pulsing in rhythm with Kim's speech. "We... We accept your challenge, organic warrior." Commander Hyun watched in growing horror as Ambassador Veltar, the most reserved diplomat in the galaxy, began drawing complex battle plans on a whiteboard while wearing a paper crown that read Emperor of the Void. The dignified Zephyrian. The ambassador was completely absorbed in the game. He had created detailed maps of star systems, calculated resource production rates, and was now planning a 3-pronged military campaign that would make real generals weep with envy. "This is getting out of hand," Hyun muttered to Park. "Are you kidding?" She replied without looking up from her elaborate civilization notes. "The Nexari just formed an alliance with the Korathians based on mutual respect for military efficiency. Do you realize how unprecedented this is?" It was true. The Nexari hive mind had somehow convinced the honor-bound Korathians to work together. War leader Talver was actually shaking hands with 3 different Nexari representatives while discussing battle strategies. "I think we might be diplomatic immunity." Engineer Choimin shouted, slamming her hand on the table so hard that dice bounced into the air. "You can't attack my trade fleet. They're carrying humanitarian aid." Admiral Reef Walker looked confused. "That's not a real rule." "I checked the rule book. It is now," Jin declared, rapidly writing on a piece of paper. "House rule. Humanitarian missions are protected by galactic law. You can't just invent rules. Rosanna Suve vibrated with indignation, her crystal form flashing angry red colors. Watch us, the humans replied in unison, not even looking. Up from their game boards, the game continued to spiral further out of control. The humans kept adding new mechanics, rule modifications, and dramatic interpretations that transformed the board game into something that resembled a combination of the United Nations and a theater performance. Jin appointed himself game master and began creating dramatic scenarios on the spot. A plague sweeps through the galaxy. All civilizations must decide whether to share medical resources or protect their own populations. The aliens found themselves caught up in intense negotiations. The Thalassans offered to share their aquatic research facilities. The Crystalline Collective provided advanced crystal technology. The Carathians pledged their military support to protect medical convoys. This is not how games are supposed to work, Veltar said at one point. But he was still wearing his paper crown and calculating the economic impact of the plague on his empire. The humans continued to add dramatic elements. They created background music using their communication devices. They invented new diplomatic ceremonies that required participants to make formal speeches. They even started a complex trade negotiation that involved real mathematical calculations. They always like this? Admiral Reefwalker whispered to Resonance of Truth. I fear this may be normal human behavior, she replied, her form dim with exhaustion. The game finally ended at 0347 hours in the morning. The aliens stumbled away from the table in various states of mental exhaustion, cultural confusion, and strange exhilaration. Several species requested copies of the game rules for research purposes. As the alien delegates made their way back to their quarters, Hio noticed they were walking differently. They moved with the same intensity they had shown during the game, still absorbed in the complex scenarios they had just experienced. What he didn't realize was that the humans had just introduced the galaxy to something completely foreign. The concept of recreational competition as an art form. The aliens were struggling to understand how beings could invest so much emotion and creativity into activities that had no real-world consequences. It was a lesson that would change galactic culture forever. Commander Lee Hyun stood in his office, staring at the holographic message floating above his desk. The official seal of the Supreme Council spun slowly in the air, casting blue light across his worried face. He had read the message 3 times, but it still didn't make sense. His team sat around his desk, looking as confused as he felt. Dr. Park Soo held her datapad. Engineer Choi Min tapped her fingers nervously on the table, and Lieutenant Kim Jin looked like someone had just told him that fun was now illegal. Let me understand this, Hyun said slowly. We're banned from hosting game night because we made it too ... fun. Park looked down at her datapad and read from the official complaints. According to the formal reports, we created excessive entertainment experiences that resulted in productivity losses across multiple star systems. What does that even mean? Jin asked, his voice cracking slightly. It means, Park continued, that after our game night, alien species went back to their home worlds and couldn't concentrate on work. They kept thinking about the games. Some of them started creating their own versions. The Crystalline Collective filed a report, Choi added, reading from her own tablet. They're claiming we weaponized recreational activities. They say we turned simple games into psychological warfare. Jin looked both proud and confused at the same time. We just wanted everyone to have a good time. The Nexari submitted a 200-page analysis of human social dynamics, Choi continued. They concluded that we have an abnormal capacity for transforming simple activities into complex social rituals with emotional investment disproportionate to logical outcomes. Heen rubbed his temples. He was getting a headache. In simple terms, please. They think we're crazy because we care too much about games, Park translated. What about the Corathians? Hyun asked. They seem to enjoy themselves. Park smiled for the first time since entering the office. They sent a private message. They want to know when we're hosting the next unofficial game night. And the Thalassans have requested copies of all our games for research purposes, Jin added, looking slightly more cheerful. Hyun, stared at the banned notice, then looked at his team. So we're banned because we're too good at having fun? Essentially, yes, Park confirmed. But there's something else you should know. Underground human-style game nights are apparently spreading across the galaxy. What do you mean? Zephyrians have created their own version of charades. Instead of acting out words, they use complex mathematical equations and philosophical concepts. The Luminari have invented something they call energy poker, where they change colors instead of using facial expressions. Choi looked up from her tablet. There's also something called the Galactic Gaming Underground forming. They're using our game night as a template for interspecies recreational activities. Jin's eyes suddenly lit up with a dangerous gleam. A cultural revolution? It appears so, Park nodded. We've inadvertently transformed galactic recreational culture. Yon was quiet for a moment, thinking about what this meant. Then he looked at his team, his brilliant, chaotic, enthusiastic team, and smiled. You know what this means? He asked. What? They all asked at the same time. We need to introduce them to escape rooms. Oh, Jin bounced in his chair with excitement. And paintball. And fantasy football. And video games. Comic conventions, Park added thoughtfully. Can you imagine the Nexari trying to understand cosplay? 47 individuals all dressing up as the same character. Laser tag, Choi mused. The Carathians would love laser tag. It combines honor, strategy, and mock combat. Theme parks. Gin continued, his excitement growing. Roller coasters, haunted houses, water slides, sports tournaments, Park added. Imagine trying to explain the rules of baseball to a crystalline collective. Han looked at his team and realized that being banned from official game nights might have been the best thing that could have happened to them. They were no longer limited by diplomatic protocols or official restrictions. They were free to share human culture in whatever way they wanted. Meeting adjourned, he announced. Have an underground gaming revolution to plan. As his team filed out of the office, chattering excitedly about their next cultural infiltration mission, Hyun couldn't help but chuckle. Humanity had been banned from hosting official game nights, but they had accidentally created the most successful cultural exchange program in galactic history. 6 months later, the Galactic Gaming Underground had chapters on 47 different worlds. Alien species were creating increasingly elaborate versions of human games. The Crystalline Collective had invented something called truth poker that somehow managed to be both completely honest and utterly deceptive. The Nexari had developed hive charades where entire populations acted out concepts. Simultaneously, the Carathians had created honor combat games that combined human strategy games with their warrior traditions. The Thalassans had invented underwater versions of every human game they could find, and somewhere in the depths of space, on a small human station, Commander Lee Hyen was planning the first ever intergalactic comic convention, complete with costume contests, panel discussions, and something he was calling LARPing for beginners. The galaxy would never be the same. Humans had been banned from one small tradition, but they had accidentally revolutionized entertainment. Across thousands of worlds, they had shown the galaxy that fun didn't have to be quiet, polite, or logical sometimes. The best way to bring people together was to teach them how to play.